the Vikings idle on week 8 and the rest of the NFL action taking place in their absence, not a lot has happened today to favor the Minnesota Vikings draft position in the first round and their ability to obtain one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the 2021 NFL draft. We've done a profile on Justin Fields. I have a profile on Trey Lance coming. I will talk about Trevor Lawrence, but the realistic opportunity that we have to be able to obtain his services is pretty close to zero, I would say. So, but those are all coming down the pike today. I figured we would sort of, kind of embrace reality and go over the situation in order to get better prepared for the inevitability that we are out of range of one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the 2021 NFL draft. And instead, today I would like to talk about Zach Wilson. He's been mentioned in the comments in some of my videos recently, and having seen him play one of his games, I watched University of Texas San Antonio was the game that I watched. BYU is an FBS independent. They have a really bizarre schedule, so it's just as I've said, the reality of the situation. So let's talk about Zach Wilson, third-year quarterback at BYU. Now, he doesn't have to come out. He's a true junior, so he could absolutely stay and skip the 2021 draft. But the season that he's having is reminiscent of that second season that Jordan Love had at Nevada, and the fact that he went back for another year and didn't improve his draft stock. Still wound up in the first round with the Green Bay Packers, but it feels kind of like that, statistically speaking anyway. So Zach Wilson, quarterback for BYU, originally committed to Boise State, and it wasn't until there was quite the overhaul of the coaching staff at BYU that he regained interest. And one of the reasons that we're going to talk about in a minute is Jeff Grimes, the offensive coordinator from LSU, who came over to BYU as part of the overhaul. He did have some Pac-12 interest, but other than that, not much was brewing outside of the West Coast. So he's as I said, true junior, 6'3", 210 pounds. And I've put his year totals up side by side here so that you can sort of compare and contrast. And then we'll revisit these in a minute at the end when I want to talk about a hypothetical, if you will. So 2018, he placed 9 games, 120 for 182, 65.9% completion percentage, a little over 1,500 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. BYU goes 7-6 on the season. Remember, this was the first year of a complete rebuild, so he also wasn't the de facto starter that year, if you will. Next year, in 2019, plays another 9 games, 199 for 319, 62.4% completion percentage, 2,382 yards, 11 TDs, 9 interceptions. The BYU goes 7-6 once again. There are some injuries mixed in with all of this, so be aware of that. For 2020, he has played 6 games so far, 126 for 161, 78.3 completion percentage. That is incredible. 1,928 yards, on pace for his best season yet. 16 touchdowns, 1 interception so far. BYU is steamrolling to a 6-0 record. Last game that he played was yesterday versus Texas State, 19 for 25, 287 yards, 4 passing touchdowns. The kid is on fire and BYU is rolling. So let's talk about why that is. So Zach Wilson finds himself in what you would call the ideal situation, right? We always talk about quarterbacks finding the right scheme fit, the right coaching staff, especially at the NFL when they get drafted to the next level. Can a Tua Tagovailoa succeed in this offense? Can a Derek Carr succeed in this offense? What happens if you flip an offense that isn't used to a West Coast scheme? Is it going to succeed? And he finds himself in a situation, as we talked about Jeff Grimes before, who came in from LSU with no offensive coordinator experience. He was a offensive lines coach by trade, and that is part of the reason that he has succeeded, because they have built this offense into quite the juggernaut through a couple of ideas, and that's being super tough. All of the offensive linemen are, I think it's 4 out of the 5 are returning starters, all upperclassmen. They've been in the system for 3 years. They're all over 300 pounds total, so it's a very strong, physical, aggressive offensive line. Protects him very well. I think up until a couple weeks ago, there was like 19 pressures on 120 snaps, something to that effect. I don't have the exact statistics, so don't quote me on that, but it was something that was incredibly wild. So there is that to consider. The offense has been described in a piece published to The Athletic that I read as reliable and violent, the RVO, reliable violent offense, which is kind of a wild name, but it appears to be working. So, and the other thing is, I said, of course, the veteran surrounding cast that he's had. Having a number of guys in the same system for 3 years is something to be commended for, because, you know, in college football, especially with the big Power 5 teams, you see interchangeable parts coming and going all the time, players declaring early, transfers, what have you. So to be able to keep a system in place for more than 2 years is actually kind of an accomplishment. So let's talk about briefly pros and cons that I've seen so far and have read in scouting reports. Number one, adjust to new talent. And as we talked a lot about just now about the continuity on the offensive line, skill position players on BYU have had a changeover. He's lost his top 3 wide receivers last year, I believe, and their most prominent tight end was lost for the season due to injury in preseason camp. So he's had to adjust to a lot of new pass catchers. And as you could see by the statistics so far this year in 6 games, that hasn't mattered that much. So he's able to, gel and establish what you would call, I guess, a good relationship with the players that he is working with. So that is something to keep in mind. Something where, take from at the pro level, like Deshaun Watson, for example, he loses his, top flight wide receiver, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, gets traded to another team. And what he's left with is table scraps: Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, Brandon Cooks, Kenny Stills, and Deshaun Watson is still balling out. And I don't think anybody expected anything less out of him. He's even getting Darren Fells into the mix. He's got about a touchdown every other week. So a good quarterback utilizes the talent around him and elevates. That's something that Kirk Cousins doesn't do, is that he doesn't elevate the talent around him, at least in my opinion. The other thing that he is, on the other end of the spectrum of when compared to Kirk Cousins is his mobility and his unorthodox play style. There was a lot of talk in the piece that I read about Zach Wilson, about how he is, he practices this. He has this ability to make different, arm angle throws. He's always throwing on the run. He's making throws off balance, which is a lot. You watch film and you're like, okay, that's a poor mechanics because of that throw. But when you're sort of improvising on the move, you want to be able to showcase that you have the ability to put the ball on the money where you're in situations that either break down or you're intentionally rolling out to create time for your wide receivers to get open. And I think in Minnesota, he's going to have to do that because this offensive line is garbage, and there is no clear indication that the Minnesota Vikings front offense would even, is even interested in beginning to try to fix that problem, because they've ignored it forever. Another pro check mark that he gets is the aggressiveness of his play style. Now, this isn't an offense that's dink and dunk. You think of these non-Power 5 schools as, just trying to take what the defense gives you. These guys attack and they go down the field. And that is actually the next, ties into the next bullet point with the pros column, is that they take their shots. They throw down the field. He's very aggressive with 12.3 yards per attempt. Last I checked the statistics. And there's also, as I talked about, that ties in with the mobility. This all sort of ties in together. The mobility, he's not afraid to tuck it and run. He's got 6 rushing touchdowns this year. I think his most rushing yards in one game, I think, was 40, and I forget who that was against. But at the same time, it proves that he has, another asset, another trait that brings his style of play up a considerable level when compared to Kirk Cousins, who is statuesque and looks lost anytime he has to attempt to run. And somebody who I would not trust to run the ball at all would be none other than Kirk Cousins. And they talked about his, his leadership and his confidence and things in that sort. I'm really hyping this kid up. I know it's ridiculous considering this is a college that has given us Ty Detmer and John Beck in the past, but lineage is what it is. So moving on, that's actually a good segue as I talk him up to that degree. Let's go segue into the cons. And this is going to get picked apart by scouts and, you know, everybody else leading up to the draft is the injury history. You know, he had the labrum issue a number of years ago. He's missed a couple of big games. He missed a bowl game, and he's finally healthy this year. And when he's 100% healthy, you see the kind of production that he's able to get when there is no lingering issues. So that is going to be an issue going forward, something that will get picked apart going into the draft. Last con that I want to talk about is the competition. This is kind of obvious. FBS Independent, BYU in the West. You're not going to play the most rigorous schedule in the college football world. They don't play any Power 5 schools this year. Their best probably marquee matchup this year, if you could call it that, would be Boise State on the regular schedule. So that will be must-see TV for Zach Wilson. But one of the things that I've always said is that you can only play who is on the schedule, right? You can't fault a player or a school for having a cupcake matchup here. Well, I mean, I guess you can, but this is different context. For having a cupcake matchup, or you schedule somebody that was supposed to be good and is having a terrible season. For example, maybe you schedule, you know, an out-of-conference game with somebody like UCLA, and they were supposed to be good this year, and then they're actually terrible. You know, it's nothing you can do. All you can do is play the games that are on your schedule and do the best that you can. That is, you know, that's what I look for. You know, it's one of those things that I've read from, I forget who said it, but was some of the best advice I've ever heard, is that you don't scout the logo on the helmet. You just scout the player that's inside the helmet. And I think that's the most important thing to remember going forward. So Zach Wilson, I don't know exactly where you could get him in the draft, if he would be one of your targets for the quarterback position to replace Kirk Cousins, or if you are not a Vikings fan and you're joining in on this video, I don't know exactly where you would get him just yet. I'm not handing out round grades. Still a lot of football left to be played. But, you know, we're still trying to decide who is QB4 in this class after Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and Trey Lance. A lot of people seem to like Kyle Trask this early. You know, KJ Costello is probably an outsider looking in. You know, Zach Wilson could be that guy that slips into the first round, a la Jordan Love from last season. You know, Jordan Love comes from Nevada, a small school, you know, group of 5 school. So it could definitely happen. The Vikings will probably find themselves realistically somewhere in the middle of the first round. This team is talented enough to accidentally win a few games. We'll talk about that more in another video. But today I wanted to focus on Zach Wilson. And to sort of round out this video, I wanted to come back to that tease I alluded to in the beginning. So you take a look at these 3 seasons worth of stats here side by side. Now, think about this in terms of quarterback development at the pro level. So you take your 2018 season, doesn't look that great, but it's not that bad. 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a decent amount of yardage, really, really, really good completion percentage, 7 wins. You know, if you were able to sort of translate those stats to a first or rookie season in the NFL, that's pretty good. Then in 2019, you look at the stats again, completion percentage drops, interceptions go up, win-loss remains the same, sophomore slump, right? Then 2020, 3rd year in the league, breakout season. Here, it all comes together. Everything that you've been working to build for 3 years works out. He's on the rookie contract. You can afford players at other positions because of the reduced salary at the key position of quarterback. So I just kind of looking at that, thinking about how this could work out at the next level. If we see similar results over a 3-year period, we could be headed for something exciting if Zach Wilson ends up being the guy. So that is my sort of player profile, let's draft video for Zach Wilson, if you will. We will revisit these players later on as we get closer to April, as we finalize big boards and whatnot. So thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one.